of Language Tree Online. We've been around since 2003. Also joining me, will be speaking today is David Noyes. He is the head of our curriculum. David has over 28 years teaching
experience,
and he has his national boards in English language development. So with that,
hello, everybody.
Hey, David. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David and we can get started. Oh, one quick other item is we're going to walk you through a short overview presentation, and then from there, I'll go in and show you a demo of the curriculum so you can see it firsthand.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to walk you through kind of the how we developed our program or our solution, a little bit of history. The impetus around creating this platform was looking at the needs of our newcomers and our emerging English learners that were in middle and high school. I work in Long Beach Unified, and unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of resources that were supporting that emerging newcomer level. And so I took the opportunity to shadow students in middle and high schools for a couple weeks, and just really trying to dig a little deeper into what the situation was. And actually, it really became kind of a moral imperative around trying to create or give our students not only the language background, but the cultural background support that they needed. And there has been shifts over the last 5 years in our English language development standards, and really looking at how content is in the car with the driving language standards as kind of the passenger. So looking at creating some creative ways to provide our students with some language acquisition that is at their developmental level. We also realized that there was a lack of summative and formative language assessments. We have summative assessments that students receive at the end of the year, but it's not formative in a sense that teachers are able to kind of gear their teaching practices or redirect their teaching practices to provide them with the language support that they need that's ongoing through the year. So what we did was we developed 3 parts to not only our entry and exit level assessments, but also to the directed online lessons and downloadable support lessons. So we have 3 parts. We have collaborative listening and speaking. So that's looking at how language is produced and interpreted collaboratively, how students make sense of language and create meaning around that, and also
You're cutting out a little bit there, David.
So more formal, that's through. We also have language function and construction, and we kind of call that the engine to the language. That's where we're looking at text structure. We're looking at parts of speech. We're looking at cohesion, conjunctions, how language is put together to convey meaning. And then lastly, a really important part of our program is the foundational literacy skills. We realized that our middle and high school students had some gaps in their English foundational literacy skills, and we wanted to provide them with the support and resources to be able to access the core curriculum. So we created when we start looking at our assessment and also the online lesson considerations, we really wanted to make sure that we provided a multisensory approach where students were given opportunities for auditory and visual response and activities. So we realized that many of the summative assessments that we have in the state, it's just a one-shot deal, and it didn't provide students opportunities for the brain to really be activated. So one of the things that we also looked at schema or social background and geographical background. So we wanted to provide some familiar context around the middle and high school experience. So things that they were facing every day. and things that scenarios that they had a grasp of, but really trying to articulate that around the language standards. So the alignment, once again, around the foundational literacy skills, the collaborative listening and speaking, and the language function and construction. These are really the kind of the targets that we hit in foundational literacy skills. It's letter knowledge, phonological or phonemic awareness, and phonics development in English. The collaborative experience where students are engaging socially and academically, again, interpretation or interpretive mode, and the productive mode. I kind of talked a little bit about that. And then the language function and construction, again, just kind of hovering around structuring cohesive texts, expanding and enriching ideas, how they add on to their thoughts in both informal and formal ways, and then connecting and condensing ideas in both oral and written communication.
Great, thanks, David.
Sure.
I'll talk a minute about the entry and exit assessment modules. So one of the things that we did that's very unique is with our assessments, we embedded just a single standard per question. So most of the state testing, they'll embed multiple standards within a question. The reason why we only did the single standard in the question is we wanted educators to be able to pinpoint at the skill level what the student may or may not know. We also have more than one question with that single standard embedded. So those three buckets David was talking about, the foundational literacy skills, the collaborative listening and speaking, the language function and construction. Each one of those assessment areas has a total of 25 assessment questions. So in total, it's a very thorough assessment. It has 75 questions. The nice thing about it being online is they certainly don't need to sit down and do this big, long, arduous assessment. They can start on foundational literacy, get through 5 questions, and then, next time they log back in, they'll pick up right, where they left off. And the other big thing is we really wanted to make sure we had equity of access and giving these students every opportunity to really understand what's being asked. So by using this multisensory technique, they get the visual input, they get audio, there's the text. So again, trying to make it as simple as possible to understand what the assessment questions are asking. And they can, if it's video-based or audio-based, they can view it multiple times before they answer the question. And then the first lesson module, so the standards-based assessment, the entry assessment corresponds to the standards-based lessons. So the first lesson module is that bucket of foundational literacy skills. So we have a very similar layout that we use. We always have the virtual professor providing the video input or the lesson. And then there's the activity or the interactive output. Those are fun interactive things that the students do to really reinforce what was being taught in the video lesson. And you can see over here on the right hand side the different things that are covered in the foundational literacy skills, everything from letter identification to vowel and consonant discrimination, all the way to sentence syntax.
The collaborative listening and speaking, again, just really trying to hone in on that multisensory input. We did want to include an integration of both science and social studies themes, not necessarily standards aligned in the level 1, but we did want to provide them with some catchy or some kind of fun lesson scenarios where we're able to really address or give them access to the language demand. That's where it comes up in the collaborative, productive, and interpretive skills. So we do offer both social and academic topics that the students are navigating through. It's the same with the language function and construction. Again, we wanted to create opportunities for processing the language through scenarios that they have had some exposure to or are currently kind of going through, if you will. again, with the standards on the right, we really wanted to make sure that we were hitting the lessons that we have in the lesson modules. Is we were really hitting a single standard from a granular module or granular level. So we were able to assess or look at the student's progress exactly as it is kind of revolving around the actual standard. We didn't want to embed multiple standards. This is probably the one of the things that we're most excited about. It's the downloadable lessons, or the in-class activities. This was actually born out of feedback from our teachers that although the students were able to progress through the lessons and the teachers were able to kind of formatively assess where they were at, one of the big asks was, what's next? What if we still have students that are struggling within some of these language skills? And so we provided the teachers with a downloadable lesson template that really follows kind of a gradual release of responsibility, the I do, the we do, the you do, but it also embeds more opportunities for writing. So there's the skill review, the guided practice, and independent practice, and also opportunities for really amplifying the language for our students to get them to collaboratively speak to one another. We do find that if we're not teaching off the digital platform, that the language can become passive. And so we really wanted to make sure that we were activating those language opportunities for our teachers and the students themselves.
Great, thank you, David. I'm going to switch gears here and share my screen so that we can all have a look at the curriculum. So essentially you can see up here, hopefully everybody can see my screen okay. I've already logged in as a teacher. So teachers and students essentially see the same thing. The only difference is teachers have access to the reporting, and teachers also have access to the downloadables, whereas the students do not. So let's jump in here. You can see over on the left side under My Courses, the different modules. Let's look at the entry assessment. So as we talked about in the presentation, here's the three buckets: the foundational literacy, the collaborative listening and speaking, the language function and construction. So I'm just going to go into one of them and give you an idea of what an assessment question looks like, or a couple of them. Okay. Here we go.
Look at the picture and listen to this sentence. Angela went to the library to check out a book. Which word below can be used to replace the name Angela?
And then from here, you know, they can read or use the audio button
She.
For their choices, make their selection, go to the next page. And then you can see, I'll just play it real quick, another question. Again, we're assessing the knowledge of pronouns.
Look at the picture and listen to the sentence. John likes to eat ice cream after school. Which word below can be used to replace the name John?
And there's actually another question as it relates to knowledge of pronouns, but I think you get the gist. So for the sake of time, what I want to do is just show you now the correlation between the standards-based assessment and the lessons. So let's go into the lesson modules. And again, it's those same three buckets. I'll just click on each one briefly so you can see the number of lessons. So for foundational literacy, there's a total of 9 lessons, and it tells you what each lesson is covering. And then for collaborative listening and speaking, there's a total of 12 lessons. And I want to point out too that some lessons are longer than others because it really just depends on, you know, some of the standards have like substandards like A and B underneath them. So it really just depends on how lengthy the standards are. So each lesson is a standard. So then the language, function, and construction lesson module, there's a total of 7 lessons. So to just give you an idea of the correspondence, so we looked at the language, function, and construction entry assessment. I showed you a couple of questions that were assessing pronouns. And now you can see lesson 2 is a lesson on pronouns. So let's start at the top here. And you'll see the virtual professor with the video input.
In this lesson, we will learn about personal pronouns and how they are used in reading and writing. Let's review. A personal pronoun can refer to a person, place, thing, or idea. Here's an example. The boy walks to school. He walks to school. The pronoun he is used to rename the noun boy. Here's another example. The dish is in the sink. It is in the sink. The pronoun it refers to the dish in the sink. One more rule about personal pronouns. They can be masculine, feminine, or neither. When the noun refers to a place, thing, or idea, we use it. The pronoun it is neither masculine nor feminine.
Okay, so then from there we get into the interactive components. So here we have your standard T-chart with the noun and the applicable pronoun on the right, and some instructions here.
Look at the pictures below. Choose the correct pronoun.
And so students can go through and select the appropriate pronoun based on the images. This is a pretty lengthy lesson, so again, I won't keep going, but I just wanted to show you the correlation there. And then let's go back to home. So I showed you a little bit of the entry assessment, a little bit of a lesson module, and the exit assessment, again, it's those same 3 buckets. We're assessing the same things. The questions are not exactly the same, but I'll give you a feel for the different types of questions that we ask, or assess, I should say.
Watch the video on how honey is collected. Bees make honey. A beekeeper collects the honey. First, the beekeeper collects the honeycomb from the beehive. Next, the beekeeper puts the honeycomb in a machine called an extractor. The extractor takes the honey out of the honeycomb. The beekeeper pours the honey into a jug. The honey must sit for 12 hours. Finally, the honey is put into jars or containers. Now the honey is ready to eat.
Okay, so from there, it asks them the question.
Which sentence below expresses an opinion about the work of a beekeeper?
And then they can read or listen to, their answer choices. And if need be, they could certainly watch the video over again. So that is kind of a quick high level. There's a few more things I'd like to show you. Let's go back to the entry assessment. So at the bottom of the entry assessment, well, actually, I'm going to show you the reporting first. Let's first look at the reporting. So you go into grades. And, I can't show you real district data that we have, but we put in some, just some student, basic student data, made up student data. But there's the grader report tab, and it shows you, these 4 students. And then this nice little button here, you can click on, and you can see actually what answers they got right or wrong. You can even click on the one and see, scroll down and see the one that they missed. So it gives you some really good insight as to, what they did or did not know. And then let me go back. And then we have the overview report. And this report, you can select one from the drop-down, the student, and then it just gives you kind of a high-level overview, like how they did overall, the entry assessment, overall with the lesson modules. My personal favorite is the student report. I think it's the most useful because you can click on an individual student, and then for the entry assessment area, let's say we look at collaborative speaking and listening, you can show the report, and it will tell you what skill was being assessed, the total number of questions, what they got correct, and then the description of what we were assessing. So that gives you some really good insight. And then from there, let's go back to the entry assessment. The other resource that David was talking about that corresponds nicely to the online lessons is if you scroll to the bottom of the entry assessment page, you will see your downloadables. So you see it's hidden from the students. But the downloadables, we'll just click on one. So for the number of online lessons, there's the same number of downloadable lessons. So you can click on this. And this can be used in small group instruction. Like I've seen a lot of classrooms that use our program where they'll have their students working on their Chromebooks, and then the teachers working in small group using the downloadable, and they kind of have a rotation going. And I've actually seen it where there was a whole ELD designated class of students of similar level where she did the this as like a whole class type of activity. But we try to do a very good job with just describing the activities and making sure that we had everything there so the teachers didn't have to go and find, you know, cards and things and images. So it's all right there. I'm kind of scrolling fast, but this is just to give you an idea. Okay, I'm going to jump back. And then the last piece that I wanted to show you that we didn't really talk about in the overview too much, but we did do an entire module on American school culture. So I'm going to click on that. And really the intent for American school culture was really to help our newcomers become comfortable in their new country, in their new culture, in their new school environment, and help them with some functional vocabulary. So what we did is we broke it into 6 chapters or 6 topic areas. And as we developed this, we got a lot of feedback from a lot of educators across the country to really make sure we try to hit all the important parts. And so for school culture, we have the option for the video to be in either English or Spanish. And then again, that's the video input. And then there's the interactive piece is next. And then the 4th piece, and each chapter is very similar, has a vocabulary builder. And the vocabulary builder also has video input and interactivity that is just scaffolded vocabulary to help expand the student vocabulary in and around the school environment. So these are the chapters: school day and school rules, class participation, school resources, where to go to get help, morning break and lunch, that's a big one, where to go in the cafeteria, how do you order, where would you sit. This one I think is great because, you know, there's no better way to know a culture than to understand their holidays and traditions. And then lastly, extracurricular activities. You know, most of the students that we interviewed through this process, their number one concern was, how do I make a friend and how do I fit in? And I think extracurricular activities are great to meet peers, you know, that have a similar interest. So, and then as we did with the lesson modules with school culture, you can see it's hidden from students, but we also have the downloadables as well here. So if you click the downloadables, you'll see there's 6 downloadables for the 6 online chapters. So that is it in a nutshell. It's a lot of information, I know, in a short amount of time, but does anybody have any questions or anything?
Jennifer, I do have a couple questions that came up.
Great.
The first one is, Many of my newcomers don't have any language transfer skills. How could they use this program?
I could probably flag that question. One of in the schools that we've been working in that have the newcomers, we suggest that the teachers begin with the American school culture piece, because the activities, the online activities and the downloadable lessons are really around building functional vocabulary for those students. And we tried to use the functional vocabulary, meaning the vocabulary around foods, around parts of a school, resources in a school. So we really connected it to the actual chapters. So they were building language that way. Additionally, we also had the students take the foundational skills assessment portion. So the teacher had an idea of what skills were not non-transferable. And for many of our students, there were a lot. So we actually had the teacher just really focusing on the foundational skills for that first semester, and just building the functional vocabulary and the foundation.
Okay. And then there was one more question. Will this program last me throughout the school year?
I could actually flag that. We've had teachers use the program comprehensively through the year, and that's when they were using it with fidelity. So the teacher was really taking the time to interpret the data and to kind of formatively assess how the students were doing online within the lessons, and then kind of doing his and her due diligence around some of the small group lessons that subsequently were provided, as the students kind of go through the lessons. Additionally, we suggested that the teachers slow down a little bit too. So we didn't want them to rush through the content. So we had some really innovative things happening. We had teachers that were kind of introducing some of the chapters whole group, using a lot of active participation. We included some yes, no question, ABCD. So some of the teachers are actually going back into the chapters and kind of reviewing them again as the students were kind of going through them individually. So just some really creative ways to kind of build the opportunities for really, really owning those language skills. So it did take up to a year, and we had some teachers that weren't quite able to finish everything, but in retrospect, they were able to go back the next year, the following semester, and really make some changes that they would get them through most of the chapters.
Okay, thank you. It looks like that was the end of the questions, so I'm just going to wrap it up. First of all, thank you both Jennifer and David. That was very informative. As you can see, Language Tree Online is an excellent solution for beginner language learners. So if you would like more information, have any questions, or would like to request a quote, please contact us at Studica. We will be happy to help. You can reach us via email at info@studica.com or call us at 888-561-7521. And as I mentioned before, I will be sending a follow-up email, so all that information will be included. So thank you very much and enjoy your day.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.